Happy Friday. The wheels do indeed keep turning. Woo! If it's around 9 o'clock, you got me, Babz Rawls Ivy, on Lovebabz Lovetalk. And I'm talking today. Guess who's back?
Hey, Babz.
My spiritual boyfriend. My spiritual friend, Enroue Halfkenny. Hello.
Hey, Babz.
It's nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
And you know what? Today is a good day to have you on.
Just because?
I mean, any time that you're here, but you always seem
why for you today?
You know why? Because every time you show up, you bring a message that I know God needs me to hear.
Okay.
So I'm sitting in that space today, thinking, okay, all right. What's the good word today? What's the uplift?
I had some thoughts for today.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes that happens. I try not to both kind of overly prepare.
That's a great ring that you have on, by the way.
Oh, thank you. So this is it's wood. It's a teak wood ring with silver on the inside, and that holds it. And it's connected to the engagement ring that my wife and I made for each other, which originally was out of wood. At the time, both of us worked with our hands, and I worked in a cabinet making shop in Boston, and she was a chef, private chef, also in Boston, and doing catering work. And so we made these all wood rings that we wore as our engagement rings. And then we stopped wearing them because actually a solid wood ring is actually very fragile. And so doing the kind of work we did, I mean, we still have them. They're still whole. They're fine. But she was walking around in Soho in New York and saw this artist who made wooden rings kind of wrapped in metal.
Mm-hmm.
So hardier, stronger.
and
so I wear that.
And very beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah.
Like it's I could see it from there.
Yeah.
It's like it's a presence.
For those who can see, there it is.
Well, yes. People can see it because don't mind Harry playing with the screen.
Right. But there are some people who are not watching. We're just listening, so they don't get to see it.
That's true.
So the teak is a dark. Many people don't realize it's wood because the teak.
And we're not used to seeing teak that dark. Oh, I mean,
right. Well, as it ages, it darkens.
Yeah.
But people aren't used to then seeing a ring that's wood. Right? It's like, there's some kind of dark
metal,
epoxy or metal or something.
It's pretty. I mean, it's very pretty. You got me thinking now. Like now I want a ring like that.
Yeah, I can't. We've had this for a long time now. And actually this year, just a little shout out to my love. This year in October will mark our 20th wedding anniversary.
Oh my goodness. Okay, where's the party?
We are going out of town.
Oh.
That's the party.
Okay. All right. Do you have a destination?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
That's exciting. 20.
Probably somewhere near the water.
Of course. Because the water, which one?
Well, there are many. So there are many river Orisha.
Mm-hmm.
And the ocean is an Orisha, right? That's Olokun. And then lots of river Orishas, Oshun, Yemanja. So in among the Yoruba, among kind of my practice, Yemanja is a river Orisha. In the diaspora, she kind of became Yemaya and became an ocean Orisha. And that's its own tale and divergence. But then there are also other river Orisha. Oya is a river Orisha. Asa, Oba, those are different river Orisha. So, and there are also rivers like West River, right? That's its own Orisha.
Yeah.
So there's specific places and specific waters that are their own orishas, even separate from kind of the many of the popular ones who most people know about. But there are also orishas that are mountains. There are orishas that are certain types of sacred trees. There are different places that are orisha, not just water.
So,
but water is beautiful.
It is beautiful. I love water. I love it. So, what do you want to talk about today? What is divining you?
What is divining me? So I had a couple things, and I mean I'll start with one, and we'll see if we get to number two.
Okay.
There's an orisha named Egbe. The full name is Egbe Ogba, and what's different about this orisha is actually this many orisha you can kind of envision as a singular force, right? There is Oshun. Oshun manifests as a river. There's Shango. Shango manifests as thunder and lightning. Was also an emperor. Was also a person, and many of them were also people who also, as aspects of divinity, right? They were human beings at some point. They were Oya was a buffalo at one point, but is also manifest as a river and also manifest as a hurricane and tornado, right? The storm winds, particularly active in this season down south. Egbe is a force of multiplicity. So Egbe in this kind of secular version just means it's almost like a guild or like a collection of people. So you can have, like an Egbe of people who do radio. You can have an Egbe of social workers. You can have an Egbe of people in different practices, right? You have this is the guild, this is the licensing body, this is the cohort of community people, right? And we get together centered around this thing, whatever it is that we're claiming is kind of the Egbe. So that's a way that it exists, just as a kind of how people interact. Spiritually speaking, Egbe has to do with kind of our comrades, our people who are in heaven. So it's like our cohort, not of family, but our cohort of kind of like-minded, connected people. It's like, we have certain people in our lives who we just feel super close with. We just feel this connection. We might just meet them, and they're like, oh, like there's something here that is deeper than just like, oh, you just happen to be an interesting person, or family. And so our Egbe in heaven is similar to that. Now, when we're in heaven, we're all together. We're partying, we're connected. And now one of us, or maybe more, but at least one of us ourselves, are now here on earth. And so we have this connection to kind of our people in heaven, kind of group of comrades in heaven. So Egbe is actually made up of, as an orisha, a kind of group of entities. So there are actually at least 17 kind of types of Egbe, and each one has different kind of numbers of people and different dynamics, and as well as like personally what our relationship is to them. Now, because we're here on earth and they're in heaven, if that relationship is a positive one, right, we're honoring them, we're recognizing them, then they work well with us. And they typically work with people in a way that's more understood in kind of psychic phenomena. So people who like hear things or see things without necessarily like a system that they're working with. So like I work with a divination system, I work with Ifa. That's a system where you have the sacred literature that you're learning, and there are techniques to kind of do the reading, so to speak. But there are also people who have dreams, who see things as premonitions, or who may hold you and kind of read you, right? They're like, oh, you need to do something, or so and so, or they hear things in that way. So those people, when it's a positive relationship with the Egbe, that's part of the gifts that come through from Egbe. And they often work with people through their dreams and through these ways. Now, when that relationship is not good and is disrupted, then there's like kind of mischievousness and a little bit of chaos, right? So that person may be a little bit spacey, right? They have kind of one foot here and kind of one foot in this like spiritual realm. They may put something down and they turn around and they can't find it. And that might happen over and over again. And that's kind of in a milder way. In a larger way, right? What's happening is these forces in this relationship, this spiritual relationship, they're like, hey, you're on earth and you don't see us. And so we're trying to get to you. We're trying to make you remember that you are connected to us. And that can be mild, or it can really lead to something that's much more disruptive. Sometimes people who have certain types of seizures, they're really dissociating, they're really kind of traveling back and forth between like this spiritual realm and this physical realm. Or they may just they kind of walk into traffic and they're like, oh my God, here I am. Like they're really not fully here. And so that can be dangerous. It's not that Enroue is trying to harm you, but they're trying to say like, hey, like we miss you and like you're completely ignoring us. And so sometimes when people are having those experiences, reconnecting with Enroue and kind of acknowledging that part of themselves and that part of the gifts that they have and the potential that they have can help to resolve those things. Now, it's not to say that every time someone hears something or sees something that other people don't hear and see, that it's here's Enroue and here's this beautiful thing, and it's just a matter of understanding.
That could be schizophrenia.
It could be some real things that lead to self-harm or a dissociation that has an aspect of illness, not an aspect of this is actually some skills to cultivate.
Yeah.
But it's important that that's assessed and determined. And the challenge is that in kind of traditionally, right, in these traditional communities, not just in Africa, but in many parts of the world, when these things happen, it's assessed. It's taken as like, oh, okay, you actually are hearing and seeing things, and like those are real. They're not the same as the same way we have kind of concrete things like, oh, here's like a car that's moving, or here's I'm holding a cup, and this is what it is. But it's just as real. That they have ways of saying, all right, well, is this something that needs to like go away, or is this something, and it's in the way of your health and wellness, or is this actually a part of your wholeness and health and wellness? And so traditional communities have the technologies and the understanding that that's possible. Kind of Western medicine and viewpoints are changing sometimes with some people, but in general, if you go to somewhere and you say, oh yes, I'm seeing some things or hearing things that other people don't see or hear, or I had this dream and it's telling me to do this thing, most mental health professionals see that in a continuum of illness. And we'll say like, oh, that's not good. And the inquiry is about like, how bad is this? Right? Not, is this something that is a normal part of your family and is actually a part that helps you be connected to people and to family, and to your life.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
That would change the whole mental health on its ear if they had that kind of training to sort of divine what's happening with people, rather than something is wrong with you.
Yes. So I had in my second year's internship as a clinical social worker, I worked at the West Haven VA hospital, and I worked in their psychiatric emergency department and also their PTSD outpatient clinic. And in my job in the ED, it was the ER at the time, was to assess people coming in. And I remember this older black man came in, no history of substance use or abuse, was a veteran, and was feeling suicidal. And so I was doing the assessment for him, and the assessment is basically like, well, do you need to be, how to resolve that crisis, because he was in a crisis, or address the crisis, and then see, well, does he actually need to like be hospitalized and come in for whatever amount of time, or do other things need to be put in place for him to go back home and make sure he's still connected to resources and supports. And he had a therapist, because we could pull, because of how their at the time their electronic record keeping is, you can see, oh, they have a therapist, they come here. The network kind of went around the country in terms of VA hospitals, and he was local. So routine questions, right? Do you see or hear any things that other people don't see or hear? And he looked at me for a second. He said, yes. I said, oh, okay. What was it?
And nobody's ever asked him
like,
that.
Okay, yeah. And so, one thing that was really powerful is really learning to be direct and curious, right? As opposed to like, oh, you do? Let me figure out some other way of getting at this. And, how sick is he or something? It's like, oh, okay, so tell me about it. And so he tells me a story of waking up recently, I can't remember when it was, and waking up in bed and seeing his grandmother, who had recently passed away, seeing her sitting at the foot of his bed, kind of reaching her hand out to him. And so I said, okay, well, how'd you feel about that? Like, what was your experience of that? Because that by itself doesn't say much of anything. I mean, it says what happened, but it's not. In the assessment, you want to understand, like, well, what's the meaning of this? How does it feel? You know, it's different if someone is like terrified of something, or then if they're like happy about something. And terrified doesn't mean bad, but it means you kind of explore it differently. And he was really fine with it. And in the course of the conversation, he actually felt a lot of love and support from her. And he had said that this had happened before, not just with her, but really with any family member or close person who had passed away, that this would happen. He would get visited by them, and it was normal for him, not disruptive. And so in the course of kind of that, this interaction, which was really just about 25 minutes long or so, I said, oh, well, there are, how do you feel about this? Or like, other people this happens to? Does this happen to your family? And he was like, no, like this was just something that was really personal for him, that he had never really connected with anything or anybody else kind of outside of his own understanding of his life. I said, well, there are traditions where people see things or hear things or, get visited through dream or not. And it's a part of their life. Like it's not abnormal by itself. And so we started to explore it more. And for him, it was really this source of support and not feeling isolated. And he could feel the love from her. And it was a really positive thing. And so in that, I both encouraged that and said, like, yes to that. That's actually not a problem. And, this is certainly something you can consciously reconnect with. You can consciously connect with your grandmother. You can consciously connect with these loved ones who have passed away. And you can get support from them to also make connections with living people, right? So not just, yes, this instant by itself is supportive, which is powerful, but like this is actually a resource to have the rest of your life be what you want it to be, the relationships you want, not feel so isolated, not feel hopeless and helpless, which he had been feeling. And just this conversation of like being curious and that there are things and these are some other ways of looking at it really helped to resolve the hopelessness and the helplessness that he had felt. And he was, we were able to, I think he may have stayed the night, but then was released the next day. And when I talked to him about, and I assessed him, but then he was also assessed in terms of his release by the kind of attending psychiatrist, who didn't know the details of my conversation with him, but confirmed that like, oh yes, his kind of risk reduction is down and he's fine to leave on his own. Now, something that was really powerful was that, I spoke with my supervisor about this, who was a social worker, who'd been there for about 20 years or so. And she was really fine with kind of how all that unfolded. And so there was like a good, so here's like my version of things. This is like, an understanding that I have based on my experience in the Orisha community. So the only reason I even knew that that's a possibility as a real thing, not just as that's just an interesting kind of coping thing, or he had this imaginative thing that's not bad, was that this was, let's see, so I was in my second year, that was about 2007, and I'd been in the Orisha community since about 1992. So I'd seen people have these type of experiences and bring them into community and into health and wellness and actually be a resource for people, for themselves and for other people. And I remember I was sitting in the this room that we would hang out in, and the attending psychiatrist was there, and he was talking about someone else, not this person who came in. And he said, oh yeah, this person came in and he was talking about seeing his dead grandmother. He is crazy. And when I asked this person whether his own therapist knew, he's like, okay, so you're gonna go back home, does your therapist know about this? And he was like, no, of course not. Like if I told her this, she'd want to put me on medication. And so this really powerful piece of because I had this really different kind of outside of normal, quote unquote, traditional Western medicine and mental health practices, I was able to work with him in a way that actually supported his wellness instead of pathologizing him for something that actually wasn't a pathology. And I think that, there clearly needs to be more of that. But some of this is also really to say that, that these things which are pathologized, it's very important for people to understand and recognize in themselves that it's not an immediate kind of pathology. And actually, there are ways that people know that in their like family life, in their in their internal life, like, oh, this happens and I see it this way. Here's this coincidence. Here's this synchronicity that happens. Or the like, I walk by this picture and like it's turned a little bit, or it falls down, and we all have this meaning around how we're trying to connect with an ancestor, or things that seem mysterious and mystical are also kind of, people understand that, but people don't necessarily have a way of it being public or part of their wellness or part of their strength.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. Like, that really is interesting. Yeah. Man, if healthcare professionals could do that instead of just like, let me prescribe, and not to say that people don't need medication.
Yeah,
I'm a proponent of that, but imagine what could be done if people can sort of know that.
Yeah, well, it's it widens what the possibilities are of what normal is, what health is, and as we've talked about before, like, there's actually a very narrow band of what is normal and acceptable, and that there are aspects of that are just how, like, we've created society, but there are aspects of that are really controlling, that are really grounded in white supremacy and patriarchy and colonialism, because it's about resources for few, and who deserves those resources, and who deserves to be in a position of power, and who deserves to get support and who doesn't. And by expanding that breadth of health and normalcy, it inherently challenges that. Mm-hmm. It inherently challenge these aspects of power and normalcy. So you have people in positions of power saying, like, I'm going to call you crazy, and that's going to kick in certain things.
Yes.
Because I don't understand what this is, and so that must be wrong and it must be bad.
Yes.
Instead of, oh, maybe I actually don't have all the answers, and there might be other ways of being a person.
Yeah.
Right. And allowing that challenges what people have based their own sense of value, sense of control, sense of, this is how I'm able to navigate through it, how I'm able to get praise, right? I get praise because I got this degree and I talk this way and I can assess this thing and make you do X, Y, Z, and tell you, no, that's not what you need. What you need is what I say you need. And so it's to come back to Egbe, sometimes it's about developing a different kind of relationship about the fullness of who we are. Mm-hmm. And in doing that with something that is also, or we're connected to, that is greater than us, or is in these kind of spiritual realms, or are in these non-ordinary realms, kind of however we want to frame that actually we come to understand ourselves and navigate ourselves and the complexities of life in a very different way, as opposed to, well, I don't see any sitcoms where people are dealing with this in a way that's real.
Yeah.
Right? Or I don't see this on Netflix, or I'm not seeing this on cable, or I'm not seeing this anywhere. So, right, that replicates what is bad. Even as, there are ways that some of this, I think, is moving in popular culture, but it's still done in a way that's exotic, or, quote, ethnic.
It makes me think about the Toni Morrison's Beloved. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that is a good example of dealing with how the ancestors and spirit and converge, and keep talking to her, right? Yeah. Keep meeting up with her. And then in the film, you actually see the child, show up,
right,
and be amongst them.
Yes.
I think that was over people's heads in a big way. But as I re-examine it now, that's what she was trying to get us to see.
Right.
That there are forces out there that we can connect to.
Yep.
Not for harm,
right,
maybe for our own good sometimes.
Well, it can be. And, in this culture, the assumption is that it is disruptive and bad.
Yeah, that's the first thought. And even if it's good, I mean, my first experiences with, through some like challenges and this kind of awakening process that I was in, it was like, oh, something is happening. Mm-hmm.
Things are like talking to me and moving me in ways that I do not understand and don't fit into anything I know about. I don't have a structure for it. I mean, I didn't grow up with an understanding of these things at all. And so having certain things come out in dreams, having certain things literally physically move me, hearing things and seeing things and making other kinds of connections was disruptive. Now, it was good. It was just like, hey, there's another realm to actually develop a relationship with that can actually positively impact your life and give you meaning and purpose as to like why you're here and help to navigate some of the complexities. Yet at the time, it was like, who do I talk to about this? I don't know. If I start to talk about this, people will literally say I'm crazy, and there's some real consequences to what will happen. You know, this is me in a predominantly white institution in Vermont. It's like I'm already on the periphery. I don't need to give a reason for people to say, oh yeah, he shouldn't be here.
I already have a target on my back.
Right, exactly. And so that overwhelm though really came from not understanding how to work with that, which came later, or which I was able to develop some tools to work with them. So it is also true that like even kind of the ways that it can be helpful can also be scary because they're unknown. And the only narrative we have is that this is a bad thing, right? This is connected to demons, this is connected to devils, this is connected to like hungry ghosts who are coming after you who just want to cause chaos. And there's rarely a positive option to explore. And so people really say, well, I don't want this. I don't want to be able to see these things. I don't want to be able to hear these things. And really want that shut off and shut down and then behave in ways to actively do that.
Well, I mean, so much harm has come from people's divination or people's not understanding what is happening.
Yeah.
Harm has come. You know, people have been called witches. People are freaked out by voodoo. People are freaked out by hoodoo. People are freaked out by, all manner of things that they cannot wrap their brains around. And so, and Christianity has so clearly defined good and evil, right? Like, so this must be evil because this can't be of God because
But in each of those cases, so there can be like fear, personal discomfort, right? And in traditional communities, right, someone's having some experience, it can be really scary.
Yeah.
And then there are people you go to and like, okay, well, how do we address this, right? Maybe something does need to go away. Or maybe you need some real different training to be with it in a different way, right? But it can still be scary. So it doesn't mean that experience is gone. However, there's trust in being able to work with it in a different way.
Yeah.
And so the fear and the fear of harm actually comes from those in power. The fear from harm wasn't coming just from people in the community, because people in the community say, oh, okay, this is happening, that's scary, we're going to take you to this person and figure out what it is, because it's still actually in the realm of what is possible. Because in the community, oh yeah, there are people who see things and hear things, and they're in the priesthood, or they're healers, or they're helping you to work with conflict in your relationship, or they know how to do these specific medicines or something. It fits. It's not ordinary, but it fits. And we were extracted from those cultures. As African heritage people, we were extracted. We were torn out of those cultures. That was beaten out of us. And then we were given something else. And we're given something else partially. But then that was the only language we had to deal with the mystery that we also knew in our blood and our bones that also exists. And so then you have a framework that starts to coming from people in power saying, okay, this is how you're going to interpret it. This is what this means. This is what's good and this is bad. That's bad. That's evil. Oh, stuff from Africa. Like, oh, that's just demon stuff. That's bad stuff. Harmful stuff. And if we see that, because it's fundamentally undermining our authority, we will crush it. It's what was done in Europe, right?
Yes.
It was done in Salem, right? It's the witch trials. We got the Inquisition. This is like, oh, you're doing something that fundamentally undermines our power and authority. We will crush that. And so indigenous cultures were destroyed in Europe. Right? This is European people who had indigenous cultures, earth-based cultures. That was destroyed. Some still exist, but that was crushed. And then, oh, now we have this institution of slavery, and we're going to have genocide. And like, oh, here's indigenous people here. We're going to crush that because that fundamentally is counter to what we're trying to do. We're trying to extract resources. We're trying to utilize people as objects, and they're not. We can say that they're not human, right? The Pope can say, "Oh no, those aren't human beings. Those are things, just like the trees, just like the gold that we're trying to. Those are things."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, indigenous people are like, "Well, we're gonna leave because we know this land, right? So we can escape what you're trying to do," or they were murdered. And then this institution of slavery comes in. We'll kidnap people from one land and put them here and put them to work, and then erase their culture so that they then learn and are taught that their culture is here, and these are the conditions that defines their humanity. And even our notions of what liberation is has some of the kind of embeddedness of what are these systems of power that say what is and isn't. Right?
Man.
Even our notions of what freedom means, like, well, I'm free to what? Like, get my piece of the pie. And we don't look at, the pie is actually, there's a cost to that, which I'm not looking at, right? So what happens when indigenous people are still, right, are still being oppressed here, right? There's still these active systems in place. But if as an African heritage person, I'm like, but I'm trying to make my way through United States culture, and I'm not also aware that United States culture is actually perpetuating this oppression, then my notions of freedom, if I'm not examining them, have folded in it maintaining oppression of indigenous people.
Yes. Right? Whoa, you better say it.
All right.
That's heavy.
And so unless we...
Not heavy, illuminating.
Unless we reconnect with these other ways of wholeness and of being, right, stretch those boundaries, we will keep perpetuating that. And we will not see where our wholeness lies and with whom our wholeness lies with.
And I think Enroue, that is the gap where people that I know and people that I'm coming in contact with are struggling with that part. They're starting to identify just that very thing.
Yeah.
And how to undo some of that for their own liberation, and defining what liberation means out of the white gaze, which is hard.
Yeah.
Because so much of what we know and believe about success, about
normal,
about upward mobility, about community, about resources is under that white gaze. And so people know it. So they're trying to sort of like
supremacy, capitalism, like it's that package of what success is. If I get there, if I get that, I'm allowed into that room. Even the story I told before, right? If I can eat what they're eating, then I made it, right? And instead we become consumed by it.
Yes.
I mean, I remember I read I can't remember their names, this woman's name, but I had this old poster from the Black Panther Party, and there was a woman who was really stating and exposing the sexism and the patriarchy that was embedded in the Black Panther movement. And so in a similar way, right, we can get caught in if we're fighting for freedom from white supremacy, right? And then someone says, well, we can't just do that because like you're then also, here's some replication of patriarchy, right? So some male supremacy kicking in. No, we'll deal with that after we get free. So we get free as Black people, and then we'll deal with undoing male supremacy, right? And it doesn't work. Hasn't worked. Doesn't work because we perpetuate oppression.
What did Audre Lorde say? You cannot undo the master's house with the master's tools.
Right.
We just can't.
Right. And so there's plenty of evidence, right, around ways that the kind of partial liberation, the kind of single cause peace doesn't just work in isolation. It has to be integrated with the complexity of who we are as people. And so in the same way, for me, now, I mean, people hold it, what their liberation means in lots of different ways. For me, the more wholeness there can be, I want to keep aiming in that direction. And so undoing, white supremacy, undoing the ways that, Black people are harmed has to include ways that other people are harmed, has to include issues around gender equity, has to include what are these questions about economics and class, has to include what happens? How do we simultaneously have a conversation around reparations, which is happening, right? That's an amazing thing. And how does that jibe or doesn't jibe with indigenous sovereignty? How can we just say, well, I want my 40 acres and a mule when that land is stolen? Right?
It's like, so
my freedom is I want the stolen land.
Yeah. That's a good point. Unreal. That is a damn good point.
But there are lots of people who don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
Because it makes it complicated.
But then we are not free.
We're not free.
We're not free. We're just doing more of what was done.
We just got in the house.
Yeah. No. A house that we built, but not our house.
Right. Oh yeah, you can stay in the house now. Isn't it better in the house? Right. And the challenge is like,
that is heavy as hell. That is illuminating as all get out. Holy cow. That's a damn good point. How are we going to get 40 acres and a mule on stolen land? God, that just, and on the heels of this 1619 conversation.
Right.
Oh, God.
Right. Right. This is, and so it means that we have to have different conversations about what liberation is.
Yeah.
And if people are just like, well, I just want my 40 acres, like, okay, fine. Just understand what that means. Well, I just want black people to be free. I don't care about like women's rights. I don't care about queer people. I don't care about disabled people. Okay. Just state that. Be real about that. And some people are. Yeah, and then you say like, okay, that's...
You hear the conversation with people, oh, civil rights is not the same as gay rights or transgender rights. It's like, but
so it's not the same. And these are all ways that systems of oppression keep us fighting the people under the same systems versus saying like, oh, it's over there. Like, how do we deal with like kind of colonialism and the way that has landed is actually about like white supremacy here, right? I mean, there's stuff around colonialism that happens in different places around the world that's not about white supremacy because there are no white people there, right? That happens, but there's still this dynamic of here, this is what it looks like. And that's type of, and if we talk about white supremacy versus racism versus it's only against, well, how it lands on black people, how it's landing on Latinas, how it's landing on indigenous people, how it's landing on Southeast Asians, like there's lots of specificity, but if we get lost in that, we forget, oh, it's actually the same system that is doing this and the same system that's telling us that we're no good and the other person is going to take what you need. So you better get yours and keep them away and don't even think about what they need.
Yeah.
Because it's a small pie. And it's this one piece we're going to give you, so you better divvy it up, right?
Hold on as much of it as you can.
Right. And that's a framework. And so if we get lost in that framework,
it is.
If we get lost in it, then that's how we got to behave. But if there's a different framework, different levels of what connection is, what wholeness is, what harm is, what healing is, what liberation is, then we get to address something differently.
Wow.
And we get to spend our energy building what we need and not just fighting against what we don't need, which is important. But we also need to build what we need. And that means we have to see differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And that work starts in self. And I think that's where the struggle is with people. Like they don't know how to do that self internal work.
But we also don't have community to support that.
That's true.
Right? Because it's all of it. Right? So if like there's some ways I work with people, it's like, okay, you really need to have this transformative understanding of what's happening inside of you, and that's where the change is. And sometimes it's like, well, you need to listen and learn from other people who've been through this experience and have ways of being together.
Yes.
To overcome it.
Yeah.
Which is a different thing, and sometimes that's needed.
Yes.
And sometimes it's the internal. But we're trained to also say, to be an assistant that's like, no, don't actually connect with community. Just do the thing in your own house. Look at the screen, read the thing, but keep it closed. Yes. Because being out is also undermining these things around, like it's about the individual and the collective doesn't matter. And you're just going to get lost. Like this notion we have, I remember it really used to be this idea that like collectivist cultures, that the individual didn't matter. And that in individual cultures, the kind of collective doesn't matter. But it's more complicated than that, of course. And I found that in collectivist cultures, which prioritize a we, the fullness and the wholeness of the I is vital for the we. It's not that I doesn't matter, but it's like, we need you to be whole so that we're creating this we thing and there's wholeness there.
Yeah.
But that matters, not just the kind of I floating out just to kind of get what I need.
I think you're right, because there's a lot of I out there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of eyes bumping into each other,
right?
And not knowing that community is,
I feel threatened by community.
Yes.
Well, I can't be myself if I go out there. Well, we've learned that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a feedback to it, because so much of us are hurting that we're in a community. We're trying to move things a certain way. Like, this is how it should work. Like, this is what liberation looks like, and our own wholeness and wellness isn't brought into that, then we're actually creating something else, which actually then causes harm. And it's like, I don't want to be in community because it's a big mess.
I read a piece the other couple of months ago that said, no time in the history of the world have more people been more lonelier. With all the tools of connectedness and communication, people are exceedingly and increasingly alone.
And that is a developed country culture problem. Indigenous cultures didn't have that problem.
Yeah,
rates of
everybody needed everybody, and
rates of depression, rates of like psychosis, rates of all the markers of all the markers of health are worse in industrialized countries and developed countries. And as soon as people leave a traditional culture and come here to the United States and start eating what we eat, their health tanks.
Absolutely.
Their wellness tanks.
Absolutely. Study after study, I've seen that. There's a whole bunch of health studies around industrialized diets, and folks who don't accept who don't eat this way live longer and have less ailments and illness.
Standard American diet. Sad.
Yes.
Standard, right? Oh, yes.
But it's held up as,
this is the goal. This is the This is what you're aiming for.
Yes.
And not only is it held up as that, we go to places and destroy their infrastructure to put in ours.
Yeah.
It's not. There's no free choice. We set up situations, right? We burn the Amazon rainforest, right? This isn't just like a U.S. thing. This is this mentality of consuming, for wealth, and a certain kind of wealth and a certain kind of power, right? And so, like, that's the cost, right? I'm in this culture. I got my phone here. I've got things here. Like, there's a cost to that, right? So it's not a matter of like, well, I just have to erase and give it all up, but I'm willing to, like, oh, here's this pinnacle of wealth. Well, what would a redistribution of that? But it's not just that, right? It's how does more wholeness come in? How do we have conversations about, like, what does wholeness look like in terms of housing? What does wholeness look like in terms of job, in terms of what a minimum wage is, in terms of healthcare, in terms of education? Not just if we call it socialism or communism or capitalism or libertarianism or like whatever.
Or whatever the ism
whatever you
is.
want. But like, how do we actually just bring these notions of connection and wholeness in? And the complexity of that, instead of this is the one. So the thing that drives this is, this is the one right way. I'm about to say this is the one white way. But like, in terms of race, that's how it goes, right?
That's how it goes.
But that's in terms of white supremacy. In other lands, it's not necessarily whiteness, but it's a similar thing around control and kind of monoculture and power. And so how do we, it's not just in terms of race, it's in terms of gender, it's in terms of economics and class, it's in terms of ability, it's in terms of age. And so those are the things to be curious about and question. Say like, oh, can I be open to my complexity? Can I be open to your complexity? And what would it be like to encourage more of that? And what would I give up to build that? What sacrifices would I make to build this other thing? And those can be choices, or those can be a response to reality, right? Like, climate change is a reality. The devastation of what's coming and continues to come, we don't know what that is. And so we're going to have to make choices. And we can make the choice of like narrowing our vision and saying, well, we need stronger gated communities so that we get what we want to get, right? And then more and more people are outside of those gated communities, right? But that's the norm, right? That's what's successful. We got to maintain our keep up with the Joneses. We got to maintain what success and wealth and health is supposed to look like as we get more and more unhealthy, both for ourselves and our communities and the earth and all these relationships, which are also unseen, right? So to tie this even back to Egbe, right? It's our relationship with these unseen forces, which are fundamental to our wholeness and our health and well-being. And we have to find our way back to that complexity. And in just doing that, that opens up possibility. Doesn't mean like, oh, I have the answer to like, here's the new economic system that everyone needs to put in, or here's the new political system, or da, da, da. It's like, oh, I can see that like instead of running over here, I'm gonna sit and I'm gonna have this conversation, or I can feel more of myself, so I can behave in ways that are better. And it may also be like I can think better, so I'm gonna move some policies in a different way. Like there's a whole range of what liberation and wealth and health and wellness can be, and expanding that is important.
Man, this was a good conversation. Now I gotta go.
I know. Yes.
Thank you.
Right.
See, I knew.
We touched on a lot of stuff.
The word would come down, and listen. I can't begin to tell you. Talking about this has really sort of in what I'm going through in my own personal life has really sort of hit home to how I'm moving, how I'm moving through, and so it's almost as if God was just giving me the high five with you being here today. Like, yes, move that way. Because I woke up this morning with a different mindset about how some things I wanted to do, and you came home and you came here and you sort of, put the exclamation point on it. So that's seriously.
Well, I was happy to be here.
I'm happy that you're here too.
Happy to let it roll out.
This is good. And thank you, Jesse Turner, for listening. It's over here on the Facebook page. Thank you so much. Yes. I appreciate. Yes, development country problem. Yes, makes perfect sense. Absolutely. Thank you, Enroue.
All righty.
Enroue will be back. We got lots more to talk about. And I will see y'all in the next hour.
Have a beautiful day. Have a beautiful weekend.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a beautiful weekend. Might get a little rain tonight, but the weekend itself is going to be pretty nice, I hope. Yes. All right. Harry, I'm on my way out. Yeah.